Well, welcome back DIY car guys and car girls. I know this is the video that you guys are waiting for. Everything will be revealed on this S10 setup with the 400 small block Chevy. Now you're probably asking yourself, like, why in the last video I went over my 357 cubic inch LT1 motor that I had in the S10. I was like, well, why would you pull out that motor? It was running good for what it was. The reason why is because I always wanted a 400 small block Chevy. So we're gonna go the entire engine combination. We're also gonna go over fuel changes, nitrous with ethanol, going to converter, gears, shocks, extra travel, all that and how it translates into times on the drag strip. So I know you don't want to miss this video. Okay, so let's quickly go over the setup of this 400 right here. I'll start from the carburetor and I'll work my way down. I'm running a Brawler 950 CFM carburetor. Of course, I changed a couple of things on it. I got plenty of videos on that. I'm running a Super Vic 2 intake, AFR 210 street heads. Now, I'm running these AFR 210 heads because the same heads that I had on my other motor, not the LT1, but the small block Chevy, already had the AFR 210 heads, and I wasn't going to pay any more. So we're going to take these AFR 210 heads. Might be a little bit too small for this 400, but we're going to put them on to see how they work out anyways. The cam is a custom roller, solid roller that is, by Dennis Stapp at Fast Cat Porting Services. Let's go over the big numbers. It's a 110.5 lope separation. It's a 640 on the intake and a 615 on the exhaust. Yeah, I know it's kind of more on the intake and less on the exhaust. We didn't have that much piston valve clearance, so we kind of had to stagger it like that. And you definitely want a little more air coming in. That kind of helps build more horsepower. And these AFR 210s, the exhaust flow is really good, so we weren't quite worried about putting more lift on the exhaust like you see on a typical old school small block Chevy. The intake, the duration on the intake at 50 is 268, and the exhaust is 264. So that's I guess this cam is definitely way bigger than the one that was on the LT1. Go down to the block. It's a Dart SHP block. It's a H-beam rods, forged crank, forged icon pistons, and it's roughly around 11.5 to 1 compression. Now the LT1, some people, I saw some comment saying like, yeah, I thought you couldn't run that much compression on a small block. Like, you know, the LT1 is 12 compression. How do you do it? Pump gas. Well, the LT1 is a reverse cooling system. Different pump, the heads are different. The architecture is pretty much the same, but the cooling system is a lot different on the LT1, and that's why you can run more compression, because the water goes in the heads first, then to the block, instead of in the block, then to the heads, like on a Gen 1. All right, so now that we got that, I'm also running a long tube, big boy long tube header. I think it's 1 7/8 headers. So we got bigger headers, pretty much bigger everything on the motor side as compared to the LT1. The only thing that's different with the setup is just the motor. So I went out to the track, ran it NA after all these changes, and we'll go over the first NA run right here. So the NA on it, I went to the track, it ran a 666 in the 8th, and a 1046 in the quarter, and of course it cut a 149 60 foot and 128 miles an hour. All right, so after that hit, I was like, you know what? Let's put some nitrous down the throat of this thing and see how it runs. So this next one is the exact same setup, and this is when I ran nitrous. Now, I let off early, so I was coasting through the quarter because I noticed at this point it didn't quite have enough gear. I was running out of gear. I didn't want to spin the motor to the moon the first time out there spraying nitrous. So my first nitrous hit on the motor was a 142.60, and I had a slow ramp in it too, so it looks kind of a little bit lazy. And it went to the 8th at a 6084 at 114.45 miles an hour, coasting through the quarter at 9.9 at 109. Of course, I let off, just kind of coasting through. Okay, so after I figured out I couldn't make it to the end of the quarter with the way it was sitting, I said, let me try my 9-inch, because I think the 9-inch is actually a little tighter than the 10-inch. Believe it or not. Remember that 10-inch was made specifically for the 357 cubic inch motor, which had a lot less torque than this 400 right here. And the 357 actually held RPM longer. Like, you could take it to 7,300 and it only lost like 7 horsepower from its peak at 66, so it really held on to horsepower really good. So you can really stretch it out if you want to at the end of the quarter. The 400, after around 7,000, it wants to do one of these things. It wants to drop off, so it starts to get either float or just everything with the motor, the heads. It's really pushing the max, those 210 heads. So it kind of really dropped off, but it makes peak, you know, on nitrous. I was thinking at the time, but I ended up being right later on. It probably makes peak on nitrous right around 6,000 RPM. So I went back out there with the 9-inch and I said, let's just spray it and see what's gonna happen. So when I sprayed it with the 9-inch, it kind of did a little, bucking action, which I'll show you right here in this clip. So after that hit, it ran a 144.60, 620 at the 8th, 113 miles an hour. So the mile per hour was down with the 9-inch, and it ran a 970.2 at 139.88 miles an hour, almost 140 in the quarter. So you can see it's really picking up a lot on the back half, even on nitrous compared to the L21. And this is with a 389 gear and the 9-inch converter. So what happened after that? Well, COVID happened, gas prices went to the roof. So I said, you know what? Let's try E85. Before I went to E85, I put in a 430 rear gear. And I also put in the extended travel ball joints to give it more travel in the front. And I put in QA1 shocks, which are double adjustable, so I could keep the rear end from just coming up so fast like it was before. I still have the old Competition Engineering 3-way adjustables on the rear. I just stiffened them up as much as I could, and then but we definitely have more freedom to play around with the front, keep it from bucking and unloading. And I think that was the main problem with the 400. It had so much more torque that the front was coming up so fast that it was upsetting the suspension. The L21 didn't quite have that much, torque, but it had really good top end that would carry out, so it came up smoother and kind of carried the front end rather than up and down unloading like the 400 was. That's the only thing I could figure out. And after adding the QA1s, it definitely helped. So QA1 double adjustable shocks, 430 rear gear. Went back out to the track. I want to run it just NA, and this is still with gas, by the way. So here's this clip right here. So on that pass, it had a I think it's a 151 60 foot, still not that great of a 60 foot, even with the 430 gears. It went a 6.66, the exact same time in the 8th as the other converter and a 389 gear, but it picked up a little bit of mile per hour. It almost went 104 in the 8th as opposed to 103.79. And the conditions on both these times were actually pretty darn good conditions. And it made a quarter mile pass at 10:44 at 129.77 miles an hour, almost 130. So at that point, I was like, you know what, the motor liked that gear on motor. If I maybe would have put the 10-inch back in there, it probably would have went like, you know, a 650-er, you know, and it might have went a little faster at the end of the quarter with that 10-inch being a little bit looser with that gear. Didn't know because I was going to go back and change all around. At this point, I just wanted to run the 8th because I didn't want to change converters, but I knew I had enough gear and converter to at least get through the 8th the rest of the season. We'll be making more changes later on over the winter. I'll get onto that later on in a different video, but that's what it ran with just a gear change as opposed to the 389s. So now we enter the arena of ethanol, E85. I like to call it ethanol because there's so many different ethanol blends that go along with gasoline. And there's so many misconceptions, bad information out there about ethanol in general that I did a lot of experimentation. You can watch those videos on that, but I think the most important thing that I really want to talk about is the nitrous times after we got the suspension working good, got everything dialed in with the ATM carburetor, went to the dyno. It made 500 wheel horsepower motor. And it made 666 wheel horsepower, approaching a 200 shot. And after a certain point, the power wasn't quite going up incrementally. It could have been the converter, but I've seen this happen a lot with ethanol. But it made more power that way. How lean was it? 11.9? And that's a significantly leaner.
Yeah.
Didn't really do shit.
Leaner, no change. Richer, no change. Timing up, down, left, right, no change. Jet, no change.
And my only guess is what's going on there is maybe the ethanol has a cooling effect and you need heat to really break apart the oxygen molecule from the nitrous oxide. So it's kind of it's a chemical process to add oxygen. You're still adding oxygen, so you still got to pull timing no matter what people say from what I've seen. And I tried a bunch of different things and I kind of stuck with, like, you know, the 666 because I didn't want to keep on pushing it. And I was really close to the exact same jetting that I had on gas. I was actually 2 jet sizes away from the 73 nitrous jets that I had on gas. And I was running a 71 nitrous jet, and of course the jetting on the fuel is different, same fuel pressure, and had a different plate that had more holes in it to give it a little more atomization, because I noticed ethanol and nitrous is definitely different. And I see a lot of people saying a lot of different things, but I tried a whole bunch of stuff, went to the dyno. You guys can see those videos. I've got links in the description, so if you want to go see those, make up your own opinion, it's whatever. So let's, after all that, getting it tuned to the best that I thought it was going to be pretty good, I went back out to the track. And this is my last pass of the year with ethanol and nitrous. And let me find that time slip real quick. So back at MIR, great conditions. I've got the suspension more dialed in. And of course, I've always had an anti-roll, even with the LT1. So anti-roll, and I took out the helper leaves, have the extra travel. Everything's getting pretty much dialed in suspension-wise for what I have on the S10. I knew it was going to be a pretty good 60, and it cut the best 60 that I ever cut, and it ran a personal best by just a little tiny bit. So here's the time. First, let's look at the hit. So it ran a 132 60 foot, which is pretty darn good. It went to the 8th at 602 at 114.04, so slightly slower than the 389 gears. I think maybe the extra gear was helping it stay in the power band longer. And of course, I let out because it was just pretty much blown to the converter, so it ran like a 10. You can't see it on here, but it was like a 10.01, almost a 9.9. So almost exactly what it was with gas and the 389s. So what did I accomplish? Well, we did get it figured out, and the 60 foot was definitely a lot better. So the S10 itself is working way better with the suspension mods. Is ethanol way better for nitrous than gas? I still see a lot of people only running gas, and they say they run faster on gas with nitrous than they do on ethanol. Like I said, I think maybe it's something to do with the tuning, the cooling effect. And I've seen a lot of people say like they will run ethanol on the carb side and race gas in the enrichment. A lot of people say you can't do that. It's bad. You know what? I think if I had more time and money to go to the dyno, I would love to like experiment with some of these myths and really get facts out of it. But I am on a limited budget. I'm just a DIY guy, so I'm not engine man. A lot of guys say like, oh, do this test. I just don't have the time or the budget, guys. I really don't. I'm just a one-man show. I do the best with the money I got, and to help give you guys information that I think is pretty useful, because there is not too many people really pulling plugs like I am, showing your timing, showing your jetting, and going down the track. We're going to tighten up the converter, and I'm going to put C16 on the enrichment, and we're just C16 on the nitrous side, and we're going to do ethanol on the carburetor side. A lot of people say you can't do that. Some people say it works great. There's a lot of like, you know, people fighting on both sides of the spectrum saying this works good, that works good. But you know what? I want to show you guys. So until that time, don't forget to subscribe. And like always, keep on wrenching. In peace.